Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Imagine that two people walk into a business meeting, or perhaps they enter a party, or simply walk into a gathering. The first person is highly educated, hardworking, and cultured. However, he enters very quietly. He lowers his head. There seems to be a certain awkwardness in his behavior. He doesn't know where to go or where to sit. He seems to feel a certain amount of anxiety when he notices that everyone in the room is looking at him as he enters. The second person is someone whose level of education, knowledge, or expertise we know absolutely nothing about. We don't even know whether he is particularly knowledgeable or accomplished, but he enters with a great deal of confidence. He holds his head up, smiles, makes eye contact with others, finds a place and confidently goes over and sits down. He isn't anxious or worried. What do you think other people judge about these two types of people when they first encounter them? I think you would agree that most people who see these two individuals, even when they don't know either of them, will assume that the second person has much greater self-confidence and seems much more attractive. The ability to create a sense of attraction in others is what we call charisma. Of course, charisma isn't always about how well I speak or, for example, whether I adopt certain poses. No. Charisma means that when I enter a place, I am able to have an impact on other people, the emotions they experience, and the perception they form of me, and that the feeling and perception they develop is positive and attractive. For many people, first encounters are extremely decisive, especially if you're entering an environment you've never been in before. For example, an educational class, a seminar, a party, or any other gathering. Your first interaction and your first impression are extremely important. You may speak a lot during that meeting and make many excellent points, but people may forget them. Yet, the memory of your first presence may remain in people's minds. Here, I want to explain some rules and a number of very simple but incredibly effective techniques that can help you have greater charisma during first encounters and make the impression you leave through your personality more distinguished, stronger, and more remarkable. Write down the first technique. The first technique is Rule 1. Presence comes before words. In other words, first make your presence impressive and then start talking. Before you even begin speaking, the way you enter is extremely important. When you are standing or walking, keep your chest open and your head up, but not in a way that suggests arrogance. What you're communicating is, I am confident. Your gaze, your overall posture, and the way you carry yourself are sending a very powerful message. Look, the messages we communicate to people are not all conveyed through our words. Our body language and the strength and stability of our presence are extremely important. When you enter a gathering, don't rush. First, take a moment to look around. See where it would be appropriate to sit. Choose your place. Keep your shoulders open, your head up, and your gaze calm. Then walk over and sit down confidently. This is extremely important. Usually, whenever someone enters a gathering, everyone looks at them. That's completely natural. So it is very important that, first of all, through our presence, we communicate a certain message about our personality to the people in that gathering. Another very important point is that when you enter a conversation and begin speaking for the first time, try to remember the other person's name and use it in your conversation. This is very important. It has a tremendous effect. All of us, when someone meets us for the first time and speaks to us while using our name, experience a more pleasant feeling. This is a technique. For example, suppose you enter into a conversation with someone Or someone is speaking about a topic and giving their opinion, and they introduce themselves. For example, they say, "I'm Mr. Ahmadi." Now, when you want to respond and begin speaking, you could say, "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Ahmadi. I understand that you work in this field." This is very different from saying, "I'm glad to meet our friend here who talked about this topic and works in this field." When you use someone's name, it often creates a sense of familiarity and intimacy, and it increases the weight and impact of your words on the other person. As a result, conversations can become more personal, a sense of closeness can develop, and this can organize and strengthen the early stages of a relationship very effectively. The next technique, dear friends, concerns something that often happens when we enter an unfamiliar environment where nobody knows us. I want to introduce myself and establish something about my personality. One mistake we often make is that we constantly try to prove ourselves. We keep saying, "Who am I? Where have I been? What have I done?" Over time, people in that environment will come to know these things about you. Rather than being preoccupied with proving yourself, try to discover the people in that gathering. This is extremely important. One of the common mistakes is that during a first encounter, we constantly talk about ourselves. Instead, ask open-ended questions. Then listen and see how they respond. For example, don't say, "Yes, I used to work at this very company too," simply because you want to prove yourself and say, "I know all about these things. I used to work at this company." Instead of trying to prove yourself, approach the conversation like this: "Miss So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so, what made you enter this field?" Ask an open-ended question. Let them start talking about themselves and be a good listener who genuinely wants to discover who they are. This is extremely important. The other person will feel that they have been seen and heard. They will perceive you as someone who has come into this environment to become familiar with it, and they will have a pleasant feeling because they realize that you have paid attention to them. Now, as the conversation continues, depending on the circumstances or the questions they ask, they may ask you something such as, "Where have you worked before?" Then you can answer. The point is that you shouldn't immediately try to prove yourself by saying, "Look what an important person I am. I used to be at such and such a place, and I did such and such a job." Let other people introduce themselves first. This is very important. There is another technique that I want to emphasize here, which I call the 3-second pause technique. What does a 3-second pause mean? Look, anxious people, when they enter a gathering, usually start talking quickly in order to fill the silence. If anyone has this habit, I ask you to pay attention to this 3-second silence technique. Before you respond, before you say anything, before you try to fill those moments of silence because you feel as though you are responsible for filling the silence, when in fact you have absolutely no such responsibility, take a short pause. Then, after taking that short pause and breathing, if necessary, use that moment to think, "Do I really need to say this right now or not?" Then speak. Don't enter the situation anxiously and try to fill every silence with words. This is not good for first meetings and initial encounters. Sometimes people may interpret this as being overly talkative or impulsive and think, "What a talkative person. He talks so much." And that is not a good impression for you to create. The next issue is our tone of voice. Speak more calmly. Let your voice come out more gently. This applies to the way we speak, our facial expressions, and even our behavior. Look, dear friends, what matters is that you have influence through your speech. Influence through speech does not necessarily come from speaking louder. Very often, if we speak more softly while speaking more clearly, and especially if we don't swallow or trail off at the ends of our sentences, our ability to influence others through our words becomes much greater. You might think, I want to speak very loudly so that I can have more influence. No. A loud voice is not an indication of your ability to influence the person in front of you or your listener. The next technique concerns smiling. Look, smiling is very good, but only when it is a genuine smile and when the timing is appropriate. It's not good to smile constantly. Some people think that always smiling is a very good thing, in meetings, during encounters, during visits, and in gatherings. But charisma does not mean always smiling. Yes, when I want to say hello and begin a relationship, it is very good to start with a smile. But when I'm having a serious conversation, my face, my facial expressions, and my smile should be consistent and aligned with the concepts I'm expressing. I'm discussing a very serious matter, and then I'm sitting there with a huge grin on my face. Well, look, that's inappropriate. It's not good for my personality. Or perhaps I'm talking about a particular issue, and the person in front of me is discussing a problem they're experiencing, a problem they're sharing with me. If I keep smiling like this, the person may even become offended. They're talking about their sadness. They're talking about their suffering. They're talking about their problems. And I'm constantly smiling. They may think, this person is completely insensitive. I'm talking about my pain and he's sitting there smiling. So, smiling is very good. It helps establish communication. But it should be genuine, not permanent, and not used in every situation, regardless of the circumstances. Knowing how and when to use a smile appropriately is itself a very important communication skill. The next technique is this. If you want to express an opinion about something, and someone has already spoken about that subject, then, if appropriate, it is better to acknowledge what they said before giving your own opinion. This acknowledgement reduces the other person's resistance from the very beginning. First, show that you understood what they said, and then give your opinion. For example, you could say, I understand why this issue is important to you. I'd just like to look at it from another angle. If you allow me, I'd like to point out something from a different perspective. When you say, I understand what you're saying, you are essentially acknowledging that you understood what they said. This removes the potential defensiveness or resistance of the other person, the feeling that you're trying to challenge them or tell them they're wrong. So, look, these things are extremely important. People who don't know how to do this simply say, no, you're wrong. When you tell someone you're wrong, they become defensive, and that's a mistake. The next technique is something I strongly emphasize. Talk less, but speak more precisely. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the enemies of effective communication and influence is over-explaining. Please take this very seriously. The more you explain yourself in an attempt to prove yourself, the less confident you may appear to the other person. Don't over-explain. For example, when I look at my own life, I see that I am a very organized person. Of course, maybe sometimes there are situations where I forget to maintain my organization. I'm already saying I'm a very organized person. But then I immediately start explaining, although sometimes I may forget why. Because as soon as I say I'm organized, I start imagining the other person thinking, then why isn't your shirt ironed? And now I start explaining more and more in order to prevent possible objections and eliminate the assumptions that might exist in the other person's mind. That's not good. You can simply say, being organized is a principle for me. That's enough. There is no need to explain further. There is no need to describe your entire life to prove that you're a very organized person. Then, allow your behavior to prove many things, not your words. Intelligent people understand that they shouldn't simply rely on people's claims. Show these things through your actions and your behavior. Another issue I want to draw attention to is this. Sometimes a problem or challenge comes up in a gathering, and you have a solution for it. You immediately jump into giving advice or offering a solution, even though nobody asked you for one. That's a mistake. Sometimes, instead of immediately offering a solution, express the other person's feelings. For example, it sounds like this situation has been really upsetting for you. By doing this, you are respecting their feelings. Then you can say, I think there may be some possible solutions. If you'd like, I can tell you about them. Then they may say, sure, go ahead. And now you can explain. This demonstrates humility on your part. It also demonstrates that you understand the other person and recognize that their feelings are important to them. At the same time, you're letting them know that you're willing to help if they want your advice. But allow them to ask for the solution themselves. Many times, people don't want you to give them solutions. They simply wanted to tell you how they feel and didn't expect anything else. So these things are extremely important in communication. Another point concerns compliments. Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, please stay away from this common mistake, thinking that giving people lots of compliments is always a good thing. People often interpret excessive compliments as flattery, and that is not something appropriate for a person of character. For example, saying, "You are such an incredible person. You have spoken to someone for 2 hours during your first meeting, and suddenly you conclude, you are such an amazing person." Well, that's an exaggeration. You can't determine how extraordinary someone is after only 2 hours. An extraordinary person is someone who throughout the entirety of their life has demonstrated exceptional qualities. But you know nothing about this person. You've only heard them speak for a while. Look, these things matter. The point I want to make is this. Instead of complimenting someone's overall personality, if there is an appropriate opportunity to compliment them, focus on a specific behavior. For example, I really liked what you did there. Or, I'm really glad I saw you succeed in doing that. But don't exaggerate and say, oh my God, you are incredible. You're absolutely amazing. I've never met anyone like you in my entire life. The person themselves knows that's not necessarily true. They may interpret it as you trying to flatter them, or they may interpret it as evidence that you're superficial, that you quickly perceive things about them that aren't actually established as reality and immediately treated them as facts. As a result, they may even think that you are easily deceived. They may conclude that you're a naive person. So, look at how important these details are. The next technique is the technique of matching levels. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, during your first encounter, never present yourself as being either superior or inferior to the person in front of you or to the group. Present yourself as an equal. If the other person speaks to you very formally, you can also speak somewhat formally. If the other person speaks to you in a friendly and informal manner, you can also be a little more friendly. The goal is for the level of interaction between you and the other person to be coordinated and natural. This does not mean imitation. I'm not saying that you should speak exactly like them. I'm not saying you should copy the words they use. I'm not saying you should copy the way they sit. No. If they interact in a friendly way, you can also interact warmly according to your own personality, but at the same level as them. Don't suddenly become excessively informal and act as though you've been best friends for years during the very first meeting. The other person may not like that. So, maintaining an appropriate level of interaction is extremely important. My final point is this. During your first meeting, try to make sure that after the other person or the group has met you, they have a good feeling about you. This is extremely important. As I said at the beginning, people don't always remember exactly what you said during your first meeting, but they remember the feeling they experienced when they were around you. And the techniques I have explained can help you achieve exactly that. I hope this video has been useful for you. Share your experiences. Have you ever used these techniques? If so, where did you use them? What benefits did they have? What results did you get? And which ones have you not followed so far that you now want to start applying? Share your experiences. Also, think about other people who don't follow these techniques. Have you ever felt bad because of the way someone behaved during a first encounter? Has anything like this ever happened to you? Please write about these experiences in the comments. This helps us share our experiences with one another. And based on experience, many people who watch these videos also read the comments. So please participate actively in the comments. Thank you very much for your support and kindness and for leaving likes. And I would like to make one small complaint to those of you who are interested in self-improvement. Those who want to work on their personalities but don't respect these requests. When I ask you to like the video, it's not because I want you to approve of me. It's because it helps the video reach more people through the algorithm. I see some videos receive, for example, 2,000 or 3,000 views, but perhaps only a small number of likes. Yet many of those same people come back and watch the videos again because they want to work on themselves. My dear friend, one of the principles of self-improvement is working on our own character. In return for the time and effort that goes into producing this content and making it available to you, we also expect you to help us make it more visible. Please like the video. Please leave both a like and a comment. And here's the reason. It's not because I think I'm perfect or that I'm wonderful. No. The reason is that YouTube's technical algorithm is designed so that the more users interact with a video, the more YouTube exposes that video to other people. That's completely natural. We are making an effort, spending money, and putting in time and energy so that these videos can be useful to more people. So when some people simply use the content for themselves and make no effort whatsoever, not even by giving the video a small like, it is something I hope we can reconsider. With all my respect and best wishes to you, I hope you succeed. Until we meet again, I entrust all of you to Almighty God. If you are interested in topics related to parenting and child development, because I have noticed that many of you ask questions in this area, be sure to follow the parenting channel that was recently launched. It focuses professionally and specifically on parenting, with content organized according to the gender and age of children, adolescents, and young adults, and is dedicated exclusively to the field of child upbringing and parenting. You can follow that channel. Its link is provided below this video. With respect and best wishes, Amir Mehrdad Khosravi.